Hello and welcome to the Visible and Unstoppable podcast. And I am your host, Louise Kirk, and I support women to have the confidence to be seen and sell in their business. And today we're talking about how do you get clients without a big social media following? Because I don't know about you, but I just do not have the time and the energy to be posting 3 times a day and keeping on top of every algorithm change and trend. And like, I have kids. I don't have that kind of time. And when I started my business, it was most likely the same way you did. You had like this passion and this drive, and you really wanted to help people. And then you found out you had to do the business part, and all of a sudden you're dancing on reels and doing weird things to try and get people to notice you. And I just spent so much time and energy at the start of my business trying to grow my audience using social media alone. And it's not that you shouldn't be growing your audience organically or using social media, but it can take time and commitment. And one day I was in this chat group. I joined a program that helped you to go viral on Reels. I'll 100% own it. I wasn't really, didn't really do it very well because Reels is not my thing. But post after post, I saw people either questioning, what's wrong with me? Like they were showing up, they were posting a gazillion times a day, they were following all the tips and tricks, and they were just not getting the results they wanted. Or on the other hand, there were all these people who were like, I just got 1 million views, 2 million views, but no one's buying. Like no one is buying. And so they'd put all this time and effort and they were like, I've cracked the code to going viral, but it wasn't actually equating to money in the bank. And because here's the thing. You can get in front of so many people like they did, but typically the things they were doing were not necessarily related to what they were selling. It wasn't necessarily going directly towards the audience who would actually buy what they have or who actually had the problem they could solve. And so they were just being viral for the sake of going viral. And if that's your thing, you just want to be more visible for the sake of visibility, that's all good. But I imagine if you are here, you are a woman in business, and so you actually want to make money. But this really changed my perspective of what it was going to take to build an audience. Given that I am a time poor mama with young kids and a husband and a life, and that I just wasn't willing to do what it takes to keep up with all that algorithm shifts. And so I started looking at different ways. How could I shortcut this process? How could I make more money, get more clients without having to post more, without having to pump out more content? And so there are 3 ways in which you can build your audience. And it's for you to decide which is right for you at your stage of business. And I'll be telling you afterwards which one was the winner for me. So the first one is build. Now, you do need to build your own audience, right? Whether you are starting from scratch or whether you have changed your niche and you now have to rebuild your audience, or you've completely shifted your offer, building your own audience, whether it's on social media, your mailing list, your communities, however you build your audience, is important because in theory, you own it, right? The downside to this, if you're building solely on social media, is that you do not own that platform. And at any point in time, you can, and people do, lose their audience because they lose access to that. Which is why mailing list is so important, my friends. But also building takes a long time, especially in the earlier stages when you're still figuring out your exact messaging, you're still figuring out how to target your ideal audience. There's a lot of trial and error going on. And so you don't also have quite the momentum. You don't have the authority that, say, people like, Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, whoever have in building their audience, although they still actively are building their audience. Then you've got buy. You can buy your audience. And I don't recommend this in the very beginning. Buying your audience are things like doing sponsored ads or paid ads, or basically buying your audience is a way that you can fast track, especially if you're time poor, getting to more people. The thing is, especially if you're in the earlier stages of business and you haven't already nailed your messaging and you're not selling organically, there's a good chance that just boosting it out to more people isn't necessarily going to work, because if your messaging is off, then you're still not going to work just by putting it in front of more people. And many people in the earlier stages, they just don't have the budget. And like me at the time, I was investing thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars into learning how to run a business and business coaches. But the thought of them putting it out and pushing it out into ads, it wasn't really effective for me. And then, I say that right, you. It is borrow your audience. And this is often something that I see women not realizing as an option. They start focusing on building their audience by putting out content or whatever platform you're on, or you think the next stage is then ads. Borrowing an audience actually works at any stage of your business. So even if you have a very small audience yourself, that does not mean you cannot tap into other people's audiences. And usually this is free. You don't normally, although depends on the person, have to pay to borrow someone else's audiences. Not to say that there aren't some out there, especially if they're well established, that you will have to pay to play. So, why I love borrowing audiences is because I don't have to post 10 times a day and keep up with the algorithm to be able to borrow other people's audiences. When I talk about borrowing other people's audiences, you could be a guest on a podcast. You could be on an Instagram live together. You could collaborate and pull together an offer together if you wanted to, or just run a workshop together. Maybe you guest speak in their program. You could also become a public guest keynote speaker and get in front of other people's audiences. There are so many ways, and you could really get creative here to be able to borrow people's audiences. There are a few key things that women often miss the mark on when they do go to borrow audiences. First of all, clarity. Clarity on the value that you offer. What I see sometimes with people pitching either to be on my podcast, or what I see in groups where you can pitch to be on podcasts, they say, "Hey, this is me. I do this. I'm wonderful. Let me just come on your podcast." And they're not really clear on the value of what they could add to that specific person's audience. Why do I want you on my podcast? What value are you going to add to me or my audience? As opposed to just you wanting to put your message out there. The second one is being strategic with the audience. Now, in the earlier stages and you're building confidence, it's okay to be really flexible. Just get out there and just do it, right? It's going to build your confidence, but you definitely want to start thinking strategically. There is no point in getting in front of an audience that do not have your problem that you solve and are not your audience. Because then again, you're just being visible for the sake of being visible. Now, within that person's audience, maybe it might only be 50-50, right? So if I went and spoke on, which I do, podcasts that are related to business, but it might be generic, right? But be men and women listening. I only support women in my program, but I know that a good chunk of that audience are going to be listening. So are you being strategic with your audience? Now, this also means that the person, the host, is not someone who does exactly what you do, but has the same audience. Because they're not going to want you to come on and access their audience if you're doing the exact same thing as them. And likewise, are you really going to want to be promoting them? Because you would, right? If you also doing the same thing. Do you really want that person to have access to your audience? Probably not. Next one is actually having a conversion strategy. Again, going on, whether it's a podcast or a guest slot somewhere, even approaching a media outlet to get in front of a audience, which is a strategic audience. Do you have a conversion strategy? So often I see women and they go on the podcast and they'll do their talk and they say, see you later. Is there a way for you to bring them into your world so you can continue to build that connection? So whether that's offering some kind of lead magnet at the end, is there a free training you could give related to what you've been talking about? Maybe that's a PDF. It's always important to ask the host first if this is something that you are allowed to do. But typically, I found that most people who I've been on their podcast, for example, are quite happy for me to offer some kind of free gift to their audience, which also means, guess what? They're going to be in your mailing list, which means they are now officially a part of your audience. Congratulations. And you get to continue to nurture them and connect with them further to help them along that journey to deciding whether or not they want to work with you. Now, I go a lot more detail in this in the 5 foundations to borrowing an audience, which is a free guide, which I will link in the description and you can grab that. Now, what actually stops women from borrowing audiences? Because some of you right now might be like, that is a great idea. Why am I wasting my time chasing all these viral trends when I could just tap into someone else's audience? Because when you tap into someone else's audience, you get a greater level of trust than you would someone who is a cold person coming into your audience because they already have the trust of the person that they are listening to. You come along and you instantly get trust. It's like if you go to a party. If a guy came up to you and was like, hey, can I buy you a drink? Maybe you'd say yes. You'd be like, no, strange man, I do not know you. I will not take your drink. Now, if your mate, Sarah, introduced you, said, hey, this is Matt. Matt's an awesome guy. I'd love you to meet him. And he says, hey, Louise, can I buy you a drink? Hell yeah, you can buy me a drink because my mate Sarah says you're okay. I know you're not a creep or some weirdo. You can buy me a drink. And think of it in the same way as when you're borrowing other people's audiences. So, what typically stops women from borrowing other people's audiences, even though they know this is amazing idea? Why didn't I do it before? The first one is they just don't know how to pitch in a way to get other people to say yes. Now, there are many people out there who are really low bar for saying yes. I just want to say that. So for those of you who are like, I don't know, what if they say no? There are so many people who will say yes because they just need content, right? They need content for their podcast, they need content for their blogs, they need content for their whatever it is that they're doing. They need content. And so they're like, I just need people. And they set the bar pretty low. Not that you are low, my friends, but I want you to know that. But if you are being more strategic and you have people in mind who you want to pitch to, sometimes puts women off because they're like, again, they just go in with this is who I am and what I do. Can I be a guest? Without actually listening to the other person's, for example, podcast, without knowing who their audience are, without knowing what value they're going to add and why on earth they would want you on their podcast. Another reason that stops women is they just don't pitch enough or they never follow up because they're really worried about bothering people. So maybe they'll just like reach out to 5 people and maybe only one said yes. So they go, well, it didn't work. It didn't work because only one person said yes. Or guess what? You just accessed maybe 100 or 200. I don't know how big the audience would be, but even if they're small, right? A small audience, you've just accessed 100 people that you never had access to. And all it took was 5 messages. Just 5. And you will get lots of no's. You will get lots of people who just don't respond. And half the time, the ones that don't respond, it's just because you got lost in the chaos of their inbox. It's not because they don't think you're good enough. They think, who the hell is this person? Maybe they do. But until you follow up and just remind them, there is a good chance they just didn't see your message or they saw it and they got on with their life and they forgot. And the biggest thing is I hold too many stories. What if they say no? Why would they want me as a guest? I'm not that successful yet. I haven't got a huge following. What if I get in front of their audience and I screw it up? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I stutter? What if I sound like an idiot? What if I just don't look the part? Now I'm in front of other people's audiences. What if I actually grow my visibility and I actually get more attention? And then I open myself up to more judgment. And as my business grows, I will have more responsibility. And I'm already at capacity because I have a job and I'm a mum and I'm trying to run a business and I've got all the laundry and there's the pets and there's the planning and there's the holidays and I just don't know. I don't know if I could take on more responsibility. And so although I say I do, although I know the money would be good, although I know consciously I could hire people to help me with these things, I just don't want it. And it's all of these stories that ultimately stop women from being more visible, whether it's building or buying or borrowing the audience. But when you get really clear on your own stories, you have that ability to shift them and change them. Because I could outline the best strategies in the world, but whether or not you actually follow through is going to be determined by your stories. Now, if any of this resonated with you and you are like, Louise, yes, I'm up for borrowing audiences, or maybe you've been starting to borrow audiences, but you've realized maybe you're not doing it in an effective way to get more yeses, then you can grab the 5 foundations to borrowing audiences so you can become more visible and make more sales. And as I've mentioned, I'll drop the link for that in the description.